Thanks for visiting the patient and the weather. Today I'm meteorologist Al Peterlin. I'd like to talk about the weather health risk for November 5th, 2025. We do keep additional graphics available at tpatw.com, and I do suggest visiting that site as the weather changes are both rapid and quite flip-flopping, changing from rising pressure to falling, falling to rising, rising temperatures to falling, etc., day by day. Looking at the surface map today, several things to talk about. One, of course, first is we are still with that full moon. And the second is that although high pressure is dominating almost all of the country, and we have low pressure here in the Pacific Northwest, we have low pressure here in the Northeast, but for the most part, we have a west to east flow across the country. That generally means west to east flow that we end up with downslope motion here out of the Rockies, and that is a Chinook wind type activity with possible migraine risk in the high plains and plains. Looking at our vitality index map, which is the composite image of all of the weather elements that trigger activity in human health, and it's lit up like a Christmas tree for tomorrow. And of course, that reminds me that I have a new song out called My Christmas Tree, available under 4 Past Sunset at SoundCloud. But back to the vitality index, we have a lot of activity going on here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot more in the Northeast, a lot of unsettled weather here in the plains, some activity here in Northern California, and we can't ever forget the Gulf and the activity that goes on right with this intersection of the Gulf and our northern shores. Looking at pressure change, what I was talking about, the rapid movement of rising and falling pressure, you'll note that we have falling pressure across the British Columbia and picking up Vancouver, going through Washington State, northern Idaho into Montana. We also have falling pressure here in the Northeast, but it stretches all the way from the Carolinas up through Ohio, especially difficult across Pennsylvania and New York. We have rising pressure up and down the plains from the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, up through the Dakotas and into Wisconsin, Iowa, and etc. Looking at Ohio, rather California, we do have rising pressure here again in much of California. Looking at temperature change, again, a rather dramatic map showing rising temperatures here in the Northeast from the Carolinas all the way up through Pennsylvania, and that comes along with the risk of migraine. We have falling temperatures here in the plains, and note we have falling temperatures here in Northern California. Dew point temperature map is also quite significant with falling dew point temperatures here in Northern California, falling dew point temperatures here in the plains, and rising dew point temperatures in the Northeast. Jumping over to vapor pressure, here's something that you don't often see, and that we have rising vapor pressure in Northern California along with those falling dew point temperatures. Note that we have falling vapor pressure here in the northern plains, but increasing vapor pressure, especially strong along the Gulf and especially strong up in the Northeast. Looking at POI, which is our measure of the availability of oxygen in the atmosphere, we have a risk of migraine up and down the coast of California, but very significant here in Northern California. We have a significant risk of migraine stretching all the way from eastern New Mexico, across the Texas and Oklahoma panhandle, up the plains all the way to eastern North Dakota, taking in much of Missouri, Iowa, with Minnesota and into Wisconsin, and even picking up portions of northern Illinois. We have a risk of asthma and arthritis up here in the Pacific Northwest across British Columbia, Vancouver, Washington State, northern Idaho, Montana. But then a very, very interesting pattern of asthma and arthritis stretching all the way from East Texas across the south all the way and including all of the state of Florida, but really being significant here in Louisiana and the panhandle of Florida. But then we increase again, picking up from South Carolina all the way up into Ohio, everywhere east from the Carolinas, but getting quite intense as we get into Virginia, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Delaware, Maryland, picking up New York and all the way up into Massachusetts, but the risk of asthma and arthritis still lingering across most of the rest of New England, Vermont, and New Hampshire. Thanks for visiting the patient and the weather today. Your comments are appreciated, and if you hurt, tell us where you're located.